Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome to Clia's Cruise Week. I'm Lucy Huxley. I am the editor-in-chief of Travel Weekly, and Andy Harmer has asked me to speak this morning to the chair of Clia, also the vice president of Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Royal Caribbean. But it is, of course, Ben Bouldin. So, welcome, Ben. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for taking the time.
Not at all. Well, it's a big week, Cruise Week. We'll come on to talk about that. But I want to start with you, Ben, just to find out what kind of shape the cruise industry is in this year. We've obviously had the turmoil of the past few years. Certainly feels positive, but perhaps you can give us your take on how things are going.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, look, I think cruise is definitely back. I think there's been a number of different articles and different titles recently about, is cruise the new holiday? Is cruise taking over from land-based holidays, et cetera, et cetera? And all of those articles are really positive to read as somebody that kind of works night and day in the cruise industry. So we're definitely back. I think the pipeline of innovation and new hardware that the sector has had arrive this year already and continues to see arrive balance of year is just further testament to the excitement, I think, that exists in the industry. Lots of new ships, new cruise lines coming up, and of course the enthusiasm for our product has probably never been higher from a travel agent, travel partner perspective as well. So there is lots of optimism. I think the other thing is Clia obviously conducted their own sentiment data with consumers, and the propensity for people to consider cruise has never been higher. People who have not cruised before are more willing than ever before to try it out. And actually,
and why do you think that is, Ben? Is that to do with the value that they're now seeing, or was it to do with the staycations all around Britain, so they had that greater exposure to cruise? Perhaps what do you attribute that to?
I think it's a culmination of lots of factors. I think we obviously took a few blows at the start of the pandemic, but I think the professionalism with which the industry came out of the pandemic stood it in very good regard. I think the transparency that we were able to provide about our industry that was exponentially better and stronger than other parts of the travel sector could offer, I think drove real consumer confidence. I think coupled with that, the inherent value of a cruise vacation has never been stronger. And I think there is a lot of capacity. So I think that is at the moment ensuring that value remains. But when you look at the price of an all-inclusive land-based resort holiday versus an all-inclusive cruise holiday, there's no denying the value from a cruise vacation is extraordinary. And I think I see it even on a personal level. I mean, I've got 5 or 6 friends who I have encouraged to take a cruise since the day I joined here 10 years ago, and they never have, but this year they have. So I've got a lot of friends and family who are cruising this year for the first time.
And what have they thought about it? I mean, are they converts?
Well, the bit that's really nice is they're absolutely having a blast. And of course, it's nothing like they thought it would be. And people who I wasn't even sure whether it would necessarily be exactly their bag are coming back and going, this is amazing. I'm seeing 5 locations in the space of 1 week. I'm off, I'm running around, I'm having all these different experiences. And then, of course, the ships themselves are so extraordinary, particularly when you're not used to or haven't been on one before. I mean, it really is a wow moment. And that's what they're coming back and saying. So you couple all of that with the values available, it's not a surprise why cruise is doing so well now.
Yeah, absolutely. In that sentiment data, I know you say there's never been the propensity to want to cruise has never been higher. Does it drill down to the types of people that are saying that in terms of like maybe age demographic or, or do you see what I mean? Like, are we getting to a totally sort of younger, new to cruise audience, or, like, can you drill down to sort of give us an idea of who is saying that they would now consider a cruise? Is it more families, or is it, who's saying it?
So people that have cruised before, 91%, I think, of them are definitely going to cruise again.
Okay.
So the
satisfaction rates then, and loyalty is...
So if you think about in the pandemic, people were a little bit less sure about, I really love cruising before. Am I sure I'm going to cruise again now? The good news is those people are all absolutely back. The data is compellingly there that says people who love cruise are now cruising again and will continue to cruise again. But I think the more interesting stat is that new to cruise audience, and it's 72% of the people who have never cruised before are now considering a cruise. And that shows you that's a marked change from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally 3 out of 4 people would consider a cruise vacation. And I think in part it's down to the huge influx of news that the cruise sector drives in comparison with other parts of the travel sector. But I think it's also the power of social media these days. Cruise is awash with very grammable moments, stories that really resonate with people, and it's attracting a younger and younger audience all the time. I see that obviously through my own brand, Royal Caribbean, with the launch of Perfect Day, which we obviously had before 19, but since we've come back, I mean, the popularity of short cruising amongst a younger audience to Perfect Day in Florida has just been extraordinary.
Yeah.
And we're seeing people keener and keener on doing cruises almost as a weekend activity.
Well, that brings us on nicely, actually, because I was going to ask you about trends that you're seeing around, you just mentioned there that short cruising is really popular, but, people, when they came out of the pandemic, wanted to stay closer to home. Those long, those further flung destinations weren't so popular, but everyone's now bringing them back online. So just give us the trends that you're seeing, maybe around destination, around duration, those kind of things.
Well, I think the first thing to say is the global footprint of the cruise market is back. So Australia was obviously a little slow to come back versus Europe, but that's back now, and most cruise lines are now operating in full in Australia. I think China's probably the last part of the world to come back, but that will come back next year. So there's cruises on sale now for China, and of course all destinations around the world are now open again to cruise. So the world map of cruise destinations is now fully open, which is great. In terms of the trends that people are seeing and what we're seeing, I think what we're seeing is people's propensity to, as you say, it started a little bit with cruise around Britain. I think that's fallen away a little bit as destinations have opened back up again. So Fly-Med cruise is probably the sweet spot for a good chunk of the
really
UK
popular,
market. Ex-UK cruise has obviously had massive growth driven by P&O's new editions of Avia and obviously Iona before that means there's significantly more capacity from Southampton. And I think you're seeing obviously big growth in ex-UK cruising from that perspective as well. But we're also seeing people's appetite to go to the Caribbean, rest of the world, Asia, coming back too. And I think the tour operators are more comfortable and more confident now in committing to air and other such requirements for a packaged holiday. And I think that's really wholesome for the industry as well, because it's providing people with a chance to go a bit further afield and do those bucket list trips.
And in terms of the booking pattern, Ben, obviously it became quite short-termist as well because people didn't really know and they were waiting to the last minute. But are you now seeing people are committing further out?
Yeah, it's yes and no. I think it very much depends on which market you're operating in. For the UK market, I think there is a group of the population that is definitely back, sort of booking their cruises a long way out.
There's a lot of lines have brought their programs out really early, 25.
I mean, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of programs that are now selling right through to the end of 25, which is earlier than has been seen in the past. I think in part that's driven by people's appetite to get booked up and to book multiple cruises and just get their calendar of cruises locked in. But also there is a big late market as well. So we're still seeing people making decisions to cruise 3 or 4 weeks before cruising. So you've got both spectrums are kind of in play.
Okay, which is probably quite good. All right, you mentioned there that operators were now more confident because the flights were back and the package was back. I wanted to ask you about the agents that you're working with. You said there's never been more interest from the agent community to sell cruise, so I want to talk about that. But obviously after the pandemic, a lot of people didn't really want to package up a cruise under their own atoll. There was a lot of nervousness around that. What are you seeing there now? Is that are people now sort of being more confident to take a cruise only and put it with their own pre and post and sell their own unique itineraries, or are you still seeing much more of just the straight cruise sale through you guys?
No, I think we're definitely seeing growth in people packaging again, no question. I think the travel sector from an agency perspective is recovering. I wouldn't say it's entirely recovered yet, but it's definitely recovering. And I think the confidence they have to be able to take a little bit more risk and take a little bit more exposure on themselves is definitely improving. And we've got lots of different partners who are very interested in packaging up groups to Asia, to Alaska, to the Caribbean. So we're seeing increasing numbers of group inquiries, and we're also seeing increasing inquiries around committing to air and various other packages and programs. So I think what that says to me is the market is definitely feeling quite comfortable about the future growth of cruise. And why wouldn't we? I mean, you've got these phenomenal ships that just keep coming, and it's not like this year was a freak year and we've had a lot. It's like we've got more next year, more the year after. And I think the cruise part of the market is very fortunate in as far as it's got an industry that is rebounding really quickly.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, Ben. On that point about new ships, though, a lot of them are being delayed. So, Norwegian Viva, Explorer, just recently, Brilliant Lady from Virgin Voyages, and that does impact on agents who have booked clients onto those sort of maiden voyages and sailings. I mean, and I know everyone says it's supply chain issues. So do you see that continuing for a while? I mean, pre-pandemic, it would be a scandal if a ship was a bit late. It didn't really happen that much. And now it's sort of quite regular, and it does cause, issues for agents. I know cruise lines are great at protecting commissions, but it's still a pain. So do you think that's going to sort of subside a bit, or is that here for some time, do you think?
No, I think that, I mean, all of those, there are very specific reasons behind each of those delays.
Yeah, sorry, I picked on those three. There's
No,
probably others. They're just ones I thought of.
No, and I'm not privy to the ins and outs of those particular cruise lines and what their delays are. I think some of them were in the public domain a little more than others. But the reality is, building ships these days remains a challenging feat of engineering. They are becoming ever more complex. The drive for innovation and improved sustainability credentials makes them ever more complex to build, and we're constantly innovating. So it's not like we're just creating the same ship over and over again. What you're seeing is a lot of new ships, new classes of ships, and of course, I think your margins for error are perhaps greater when you're innovating at that pace. Which I think in turn probably drives a couple of challenges for different lines at different times. I don't think it's a trend that you'll see. I think all cruise lines aspire to build the right level of contingency into their production schedules. And of course, there are things that happen, from bad weather to outbreaks of illness, all sorts of things. I mean, these are not ships that are built in a couple of months. I mean,
yeah. Okay. So you're saying that, because obviously it's very attractive, isn't it, for some clients to want to be the first people on a brand new ship. It's, that's a good sell for a travel agent. So you're saying agents should have confidence in selling those sort of maiden voyages or early voyages. It's not something that we've got to contend with, hopefully.
No, the people will always want to be one of the first to try out a new ship. And I think on the unfortunate occasion where a cruise line has to delay that, it will always do its best to make sure those people are still the first to sail on it, and they will look after those guests extremely well. So, yeah, there's a little bit of rolling of the dice sometimes if you want to go on the first sailing, but I would say 9 times out of 10, the first sailings of these ships often do go to time.
Okay, all right.
I certainly hope that's the case for the forthcoming Royal Caribbean launch.
I know. Now you said it, and we've got you on camera. That'd be very awkward if Icon isn't on time. So we might hold you to that, Ben. Although you run a lot of things, I imagine you don't really have control over the shipyard. So
no, I don't. But I keep a keen eye. But from what I learn, we're in good shape.
All right. Just before we move on from agents, then you were saying that more agents than ever, keen to sell cruise. Where who are these new agents? Where are they coming from? Have you never heard from them before? Are they existing agencies you've worked with that are now switching on to cruise, or are they totally new, up and coming new agents?
That's a very interesting question, and it's one we've been doing a bit of work on, albeit as a brand, but I know it's one that Andy keeps a very close eye on as well. So Andy will tell you from a clear perspective, we've never seen so many new to cruise agents expressing an interest in coming to our events. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, look at the conference. I mean, it was over 60% or something of people who'd never been before.
Yeah, exactly. And it was phenomenal. And we did our own seminar at sea where we had 400 agents on who had never cruised with us before.
Yeah.
And a lot of those had never cruised before. So I do think there is a massive influx of new people. And I think that's particularly prevalent in two sectors. I think it's prevalent in the home worker arena. So in teletravel and so forth, and all home working networks have continued to see strong growth in new people coming into travel. Travel counsellors would say exactly the same thing. So that's part of it. I think the other thing is you're seeing a huge influx of new people joining retail. So as Hayes and as TUI and as Barhead get their retail estates back up and running, I think there's been a lot of new talent come into the sector from that perspective as well.
Yeah.
Because we did lose a chunk of people during the pandemic to other industries. So that is definitely a trend. And when I look at our own data, even from a Royal Caribbean group perspective, we have a huge number of new people to educate about our brand. It's becoming a real focus actually, because the extent of that workload and journey is pretty significant actually, given the numbers of new people by partner. So I would say there's lots of people joining travel. I think travel's getting its mojo back, which I think is seeing even more people join. It's also seeing some of those people who used to work in travel come back. Even I've seen a couple of the posts you've written this week about different people coming back to the industry. 2 or 3 of them have been out of it for 3 or 4 years, are now coming back. So I definitely think travel's got its mojo back. Cruise for sure has got its mojo back. And I think we're seeing lots of people increasingly interested in being part of the great story.
Yeah. And I mean, as you say, it's a challenge that you're considering as a brand around how you get this training done, because it's a huge exercise. But I guess something like Clia Cruise Week and a lot of the events that Clia does are a good starting point. I know you do your own brand stuff, but just to get that general knowledge.
No, you're right. And look, this is a call that we're doing on behalf of Clia, so it's a good point. Andy spends a huge amount of time, always has, in ensuring that he has the best program for travel agents for the cruise sector anywhere in the world. There is no other country in the world that has a program like the one that Clia UK delivers for travel agents. And you see it in the appetite for the Selling Cruise Conference. I know Andy's desperately looking at bigger venues, because we don't want to have to turn 300 or 400 people away from the Selling Cruise Conference. We're trying to make sure we get people the exposure to as many cruise ships and river cruise ships as we can. So the River Cruise Conference, which I think is in Amsterdam next coming year, again, it's a massive opportunity to give people first-hand experience. And then you have the Winter Forum and the Winter Ball, and you've got all these other events throughout the year, all supported with an ever-growing e-learning platform, virtual ship tours and so forth. So, I mean, Andy's time has never been more in demand. And I think Clia as a group continues to put the agent training part of its program right at the forefront. And that's really exciting as well. So lots to come on that.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Andy's time, or Clia's, how much they do, but a big role that they played during the pandemic, of course, was with government liaisons and lobbying. Is that something that is now done, or is it an ongoing thing that Clia is still involved in?
No, it's very much not done. The work done, if you like, during the pandemic was transformational in terms of the relationships that we built with the Department for Transport, government ministers in various different departments. And of course, Andy's work in that field was well recognised. But it wasn't just him. There was a really strong steering group that sits behind Andy on that side of things, which is made up of government relations and legal teams, port operational people, marine operational people that sit behind that steering group. And there is a lot of work still going on as we look to leverage those relationships for future important projects. So things like UK emissions trading scheme, that's a big one right now. There's lots of focus on that. The passenger maritime industry has had roundtables we continue to be actively part of. We were engaged with the National Shipping Office and Shipbuilding Office and programs of getting shipbuilding back into the agenda for UK and Ireland. There's lots of discussions around there. And I think the time we have with the Minister of Maritime and Shipping has never been greater. I think she's due to come and see our ships in the third week of September down on the south coast. She's going to be visiting a number of ships with Andy and members of the industry. The active engagement that we have built, we are absolutely continuing. If anything, I would say it's getting bigger.
Yeah,
and
brilliant.
I think as we start to plan for carbon neutrality by 2050, which we all have to tackle together, I think those government partnerships are going to be ever more important for all of us.
Yeah. And if you're an agent watching this, you might kind of think, well, that doesn't involve me. But actually, all these things are crucial to a thriving cruise industry and economy. And so it does. I know the specifics, maybe not, but it trickles down to it being a thriving business that agents should want to be part of, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think cruise, I think, is really seen as a core part of the UK shipping agenda now.
Yeah.
I think it's for a long time, well, the shipping, that's important. And then you've kind of got cruise. I think people recognise the economic value and the role cruise is now playing in the UK economy.
Yeah, and not just Southampton, you've got
not just Southampton. Yeah, you've got exactly. And I think the shipping industry recognises that what cruise is doing to support being carbon neutral by 2050 will be critical to what the sector can achieve. And I think we're seeing a real togetherness coming together. I think that's really encouraging. And you're right. So what for agencies for a long time to come, you can hopefully be confident that you're going to have a lot of very exciting cruise holidays to sell your customers.
There you go. That's it in a nutshell. Brilliant. Well done. And on that point, just because we shouldn't forget that cruise, I think, and one of the things Andy's had to really work hard on is this differentiation, because as you mentioned, there's more and more cruise lines joining Clia. There's all this innovation, these fantastic different products, but it can't just all be in one little section anymore. So he's got different divisions now, whether it's river or specialist or expedition, family, whatever. So that's really important, isn't it? And that's part of that education piece as well, because agents need to know that there's a cruise out there for everyone.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's an interesting piece as well. There is a cruise for everyone, and nearly all cruise lines are very different. However, if you wanted a challenge to the travel trade, my challenge would be, if you look at your own websites, do they differentiate the products that sit within the cruise sector effectively? So do your websites help the consumer that's looking at them understand which cruise is the right one for them? I don't think enough of them do enough in that area to differentiate between the cruise lines. I think they rely on price to do the job for them too much. So I think the big challenge for the sector is to really start helping to educate consumers so that they can find the right product for themselves.
So would your advice, so you'd still have a cruise tab on your website if you were an agent, Ben, but once you go into that, you would have far more categories to split it out to appeal to the different types of customers.
Do you know what I mean? If you've never cruised before, why would you know what the difference between one big white ship is and another? Yeah. You wouldn't. And I think you can speak to a travel advisor and they'll help educate you. But people's first foray into looking at cruise is often to kind of browse some websites, and not enough of them do enough of a job to explain the difference between different cruise lines to help people understand which cruise type of product they might like to go on. Okay. And I think that's a real opportunity for the travel industry as a whole.
And if you're an agent listening to that advice, Ben, where, because you are right, I have to say, I went on a launch of a cruise ship recently and I met a couple who had nothing to do with the press trip that I was on, but they genuinely they just didn't know the difference between any lines. They were just like, oh, what's that one like then? And what's that one like? It just wasn't clear to them. They had booked on price. They'd literally just gone and got on this ship because it was a good deal. they had no idea that there might be one that was better for their teenage children or whatever. So it is, you're absolutely right. It's rife.
Yeah.
And I guess it's the agent who can cut through that and sell the really accurately the right holiday.
Yeah, and they're great at doing it on the phone, but the world's moving to a web first type approach because that's what consumers are using first. They need to translate what they can explain on the phone to their websites more clearly. They need to articulate the difference.
And do the lines do a good enough job, Ben? I know you'll say yours does.
No,
but,
I don't.
You know, do you think that there's a job for the lines as well to sort of hang their hat on the thing that is their USP, so they can be clear to the trade?
Yeah, we don't do as good a job as we need to do. And even if we do an all right job on our own website, when you're on our website or when you're on any cruise line website, obviously it's just about that cruise line. What we need to do a better job is helping the travel trade to reflect the differences of our respective brands on their websites. We've got to give them more content. We've got to do it the right way. The analogy I always use is when people are buying a car, they understand what a Mercedes and a BMW is and why it's 3 times more expensive than a Skoda or a Volkswagen. So you can be a bit lazy about the differences because people automatically know what the difference between the brands is. But within cruise, people don't have that understanding of what the difference is between the different lines. And if you see 2 cruise ships, one that's £1,200 and one that's £600, and they're both 7-night cruises in the Mediterranean, most people will go, oh, I think I'll take the £600 one, because we do not articulate what's the difference between the 600 one and the 1200 one. And that's the challenge we've got to do.
Okay. Wow. Well, you've laid down the gauntlet. As I said, I think it's definitely something that the lines could help with, I'm sure. But agents, take that advice, because it sounds like, you know, it will help you sell more accurately. All right, Ben, I'm conscious of your time. Thank you for that. I think it's a great way to kick off Clia's Cruise Week. We've covered a lot there, and I just hope any agents watching this are inspired to, you know, if you're not already selling cruise, then hopefully, you know, please do try it. The lines like Ben's and many others all of the others, I'm sure, in Clia are there to help. You've got fantastic sales teams that are ready to do that, haven't you?
Yeah. And the final plug is just make sure you use this Clia Cruise Week, to really amplify cruise to your new customers and customers on your databases and websites that perhaps haven't cruised before. This is a great week to tease them with some content, and I'll let you guys determine which content you want to send their way. But there's definitely a reason this week, more than any other, to make sure you shout about cruise.
All right. So Ben from Royal Caribbean and the chair of Clia UK and Ireland, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.